Nightlight awoke, her eyes opening, revealing the slits behind them. She may have been a bat pony, but it was day, which confused her. Wilson didn't really understand that she was a creature of the night, but I guess that was alright. She got up, stretched her back and her wings, releasing a satisfying pop. This woke up Fang, and he had gotten up as well, and began stretching up too. Curiosity overtook Nightlight. Why wasn't Mr. Wilson sleeping in his bedroll? She had gently moved towards the tent entrance. She peered her head out to see everything else outside was gone. However, the flooring and, well, the outer flooring was still there. So, she didn't really know what to think. She wondered for a few seconds where Mr. Wilson might be exactly. And of course, the question was answered. Mr. Wilson was coming back. Except they saw something different. Once he had came back, he walked over, smiling at them, and began moving to walk inside the tent with them. She moved out of the way to make room for Mr. Wilson, letting him come on in. When she did, he smiled. He looked at the both of them. Thing was cross-eyed, looking at a fly that had landed on his nose. Nightlight had looked up at him, wondering what kind of food he had brought. So at this, he looked down at her, slowly unraveling his pack. To pull a few items out. The first item he had pulled out was a mango. And Nightlight's jaw dropped in her. Her little slits of her irises widened a little bit. A mango. He had lowered it down to her, and she began to eat on it. loving, just relishing in every second of the taste. When she was finally full, she looked around. He looked down at her, smiling. However, he had something on. It was different from what he saw last. It was an amulet. The amulet had a red crystal in the center of it. She was about to go into further detail till he grabbed the both of them and began putting something on them. They looked, and he had put on for nightlight some sort of puffy vest, and then put on to Fang a different type of vest, a breezy vest. He had then put on both of them winter hats. He looked and smiled that it's going to be a little cold outside. Then for himself, he had put on a damper vest. Then grabbing a backpack, he had hoisted it onto himself. Simultaneously also putting on a winter hat, smiling at them. He looked at the red amulet, pulling out a second one from his bag. He frowned. Damn. I only have two, but I'm willing to spare them for you. He had went over, knelt, and put the amulet on nightlight, and then grabbed another amulet in his other hand, putting it on Fang. He stood up, said, "All right, let's get going." Whilst they were walking, in the inner side of his mind, he was having a conflict. Why would he do this? Why would he give up a gem so precious and valuable? His mind wouldn't shut up. The gem he had put on them was no ordinary gem. Its magical properties were, well, to say they had a property that was unlike any other in the land, and only Wilson knew how to work it. They had been walking for a long time. It wasn't cold, thanks to what Wilson had put onto them. They had decided to start asking each other questions. "So Fang, where do you come from exactly? He looked over and said, I came from the hive. The hive? What's that? It's a place where my mother is. Interesting. Did you run away? He looked down and said, yes. Don't worry. I understand you may have your reasons. You are more than welcome to accompany me on my mission. Nightlight got curious and said, what's your mission? To find other forms of life out here that are intelligent, and to stay away from the dark. Why would we want to stay away from the dark, sir? Nightlight looked and said, there's nothing in the dark. I'm a creature of the night. I've been in the dark multiple times. Well, I have been in the dark, and the experiences I've had are horrible, to say the least. I found myself nearly dying multiple times because of something out there. He didn't want to scare them. He didn't want to tell them that he could go insane. He didn't want to tell them that there's some evil entity that lurks in the darkness that could kill him. It had killed him. But due to magic, he had been revived. Not to this world, no. He was walking and just passed out. Didn't really know what to make of it. But whatever happened, he was glad he was here. They were walking for a decent amount of time. He said, so this is the way you said this Ponyville was located, correct? She nodded, and so did he. And eventually their stomachs rumbled again. Nightlight looked up, and he'd used her wings, and he looked in awe at it. The fact that she was flying, especially at a young age. Yes, she must have had a lot of practice. She flew up into the tree, retrieving fruit, and began eating it. Fang looked really, really hungry. I mean, really hungry. He went over and said, Mr. Wilson, can I have a hug? He smiled and said, of course, come here. It's okay. He knelt down and hugged him, but heard the sound of something decreasing. He looked at him, seeing that this pink mist or vaporous gas was leaving his body and moving into Fang's mouth. And he said, what are you doing? I'm sorry, I'm just feeding. Is that okay? Wilson looked at his stats. His hunger was okay. His health was okay, but his sanity was going down. Whenever he was feeding off of him, it must have had a negative impact on his sanity. He breathed in and out and said, of course, get as much as you need. After a little bit, he was finally full. Said, "Thank you, Mr. Wilson," and had hugged him. He'd smiled and said, "Don't worry. I'm glad to help you." He'd gotten up and he looked around. His sanity had a negative impact at this point. It was down by a little bit, but it was down just enough to see the vague outlines of the shadowing monsters. If his sanity was fully depleted, they would attack him and kill him. He shook his head, said, "Come on, let's get going. We have a long way to go." They both smiled and said, "Okay." As they both began walking, there were a number of things he was thinking of. He would wonder, would a mind like his, a genius, be accepted into the society of this place? He didn't know what to think. If the ponies had a form of government, or if they had tax and other such. He would have to look into it. His genius mind would, of course, have to know that now he had these two little fillies along with him, Fang and Nightlight, and he knew he'd have to protect them. His mind grew damp. He took off the winter hat and put on the flower crown, his sanity gently and surely going up. He knew at that moment everything was going to be all right. He wouldn't have to worry about the stress, because he had Fang and Nightlight, and he would protect them with his life. He shouldn't have spoken so soon. Suddenly, the sound of something, an animal roar, came from the bushes next to them, and had burst out. Wilson immediately, with great speed, had reached and pulled out his spear.